we are now joined by Mr. G. Chandrasekhar, commodity expert. Mr. Chandrasekhar, afternoon, and thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here on ET Now. So Trump is now saying that India is dumping rice into the US market. Your thoughts on this? For now, it just looks like a threat. But if at all, if it were to fructify at a time when India is already facing the brunt of 50% tariffs, what do you make of this?
It's a very peculiar, anomalous situation that we are facing today. I'll put it in perspective. The US produces about 7 to 8 million tons of rice, and it exports between 3.5 and 4 million tons of rice to Canada, Mexico, Japan, South Korea, etc., etc., etc. India is, of course, arguably the world's second largest producer of rice and, of course, the largest exporter of rice. But look at our exports of rice to the US. 24, 25, Basmati rice, 275,000 tons. Non-Basmati rice, barely 60,000 tons. Therefore, when you look at America's production, America's export, and America also imports, the US imports about 1.3 million tons of rice from various sources, primarily from Thailand. India is the second largest supplier of rice to the US. Therefore, our share in the US markets is very small, and as a share of total US production, our share is extremely small. Therefore, I'm quite surprised how this talk came about that India is dumping. Well, it's a question of dumping. The point simply is that we have a very, very specific demand segment to cater to, which is the South Asian population in the United States. We are catering to that demand, and it is actually minuscule, less than 300,000 tons of export out of India, of which primarily it is Basmati rice, which is aromatic, long grain rice, which the US does not grow, but there is demand. And therefore, for someone to suggest, I understand one of the rice exporters in the US raised this point saying India is dumping, which is factually incorrect. There is no dumping at all. Our share in US's import is not as high as it is being projected. Thailand is even a bigger exporter, 700,000 tons or whatever. And therefore, I think we need to set the record straight. There is no dumping. That we have to be very clear about. And we are not competing. Indian rice is not competing with any US varieties of rice. And therefore, I think we need to put the record straight. I understand the USTR representatives are coming to India between today and tomorrow. I think we need to talk to them, convince them that this word dumping is a complete misnomer. There's nothing like dumping at all. We are catering to a particular demand segment within the US.
Okay, so you're telling us that India is actually not dumping rice in the US market. And since we also spoke about, since you just highlighted the fact that India-US trade talks are likely to happen over the next few days and a trade deal could be signed, what is the probability of this matter coming up and it being resolved successfully? And what has the impact been of the current 50% tariff on India's rice exports?
I will not be able to speculate on whether this will be discussed. I'm sure this will be discussed. If it is not discussed, the Indian side must raise this point, saying this is the latest in rice export. Two things. One, the US importers, US market has already absorbed 50% tariff on India's exports to the US. That there is no contraction of demand. There is still demand continues to remain robust for particularly Basmati rice out of India, because the US market and the consumers have absorbed that higher tariff, because it is consumed by high-end consumers, well-to-do consumers by American standards, and therefore that demand will continue.
Okay,
so and India, go ahead.
Sir, please make your point. Go ahead.
No, and therefore it is important for the Indian side in this USTR talks that are slated between today and tomorrow. We need to raise this point. If the American side doesn't raise this point, we need to put things in perspective, saying one, please, sorry, this word dumping is completely inappropriate and inapplicable, number one. Number two, give all the numbers. How much is the US production? How much is US export? How much is US import? Of which how much is India's share? Small share. It's not a big share at all. Therefore, when you give these numbers, I'm sure the US side will agree. They have to agree to, and they'll understand that we are talking sense. Yeah.
Understood. We will have to take a small commercial break on that note, but Mr. Chandrasekhar, stay on with us. We'll continue our conversation after this short break. Welcome back. You're still tuned into Commodity Central, and Mr. Chandrasekhar is still with us. Sir, thank you so much for waiting by patiently and staying on with us. Since you were making your point that India is quote-unquote not pumping or not pushing export of rice in the US market, this has been the case. 50% tariffs have become applicable with effect from August, isn't it? Then have Indian exporters found different markets to perhaps mitigate impact of lesser sales in the US market?
Indian exporters are all the time exploring newer and newer markets. There is no doubt at all. And therefore, their constant endeavor is not to depend on any one single market. And particularly in case of Basmati rice, we have probably more than 24 countries to which we export. But allow me to just go back to that word dumping once again. What does dumping mean? When the goods of an exporting country unfairly compete with similar goods of an importing country, it can be called dumping. But in this case, India's Basmati rice, which is our export to the US, does not compete with US's domestically grown rice. There is no competition at all because the US does not grow Basmati rice, long grain aromatic rice. And whereas that is our specialty, India's specialty. And number one. Number two, there is demand for a specific customer segment or consumer segment which we are catering to. And then therefore, the term dumping is not applicable at all, which is something we need to take up with the US, put things in perspective. But I know the conversation I heard that one of the rice exporters in the US, an American company, complained to Mr. Trump during their trade discussion that there is a lot of dumping, which is actually not correct. It should be rejected. And from the Indian side, we need to put things in perspective that there is no dumping at all. We are simply servicing a particular demand segment. This is number one. Now, you said, are we diversifying? Yes. Indian exporters, rice exporters are all the time exploring markets for both Basmati rice and non-Basmati rice. In case of Basmati rice, as I said, we have more than 24 countries to which we supply. And I'm sure the demand for Basmati rice will continue to expand because the culinary habits, food habits, eating habits are all changing all over the world. And Basmati is the ideal rice for things like biryani, etc., which are very, very popular. Asian cuisine, Indian cuisine is becoming increasingly popular. And therefore, this is the dumping argument is something we need to set straight with the government of the United States. Yeah.
Okay, and Mr. Chandrasekhar, how do you view India's positioning in the global market, not just US? US, I'm sure Thailand and several other countries with low tariff rates are enjoying the benefit at the cost of India's competitive disadvantage. But what about other countries then?
No, I think that India has an advantage in terms of our rupee depreciation as far as exports are concerned, right? Whereas other countries like Thailand have that tariff advantage, which we are yet to enjoy that tariff advantage. We can only hope that the ongoing negotiations, the conclusion of the BTA, bilateral trade agreement, whenever it happens, leads to a very substantial reduction in tariff. That's the hope that we need to hold. At the moment, again, from our side, we need to be really good bargainers, tough bargainers to convince the other side that it is in the interest of US consumers that they should continue to import rice from India, high-end long grain aromatic basmati rice to meet their very specific customer demand. Therefore, it's a matter of negotiation. At the same time, we have to constantly try and expand our markets in other parts of the world, which happens all the time, really speaking. Yeah.
Okay, and what's your view when it comes to India-US trade deal and perhaps the talks which are likely to happen over the next few days? What kind of impact is that likely to have not only on rice but the entire commodity basket as a whole, which is currently facing the brunt of 50% tariffs?
Yeah, I know it's a very tricky situation. There is a lot of pressure on India to open up import of its agriculture sector. We have resisted so far, and possibly that is where the negotiations are getting stuck. But I think we need to look at things differently. For example, the US wants us to import soybean. I would think we should be open to importing technology from the US to produce soybean domestically. Our yields are very low. Therefore, we don't need physical import of soybean, but we need from the US the technology. I think we need to look at that. The US wants us to import a lot of corn, which is obviously genetically modified corn. My own sense is if that corn were to go for extraction of ethanol for bioenergy, I don't see that. I don't see that as a big challenge or any. It's not such a big issue at all. And then therefore, I think we have to be tactful. We have to be accommodative, but we cannot surrender, which is important. Our dairy sector, of course, is highly vulnerable. Therefore, we've got to be very careful in ring fencing our dairy sector in particular. But in case of agriculture, I think we need technology. That's the most important part, and we should be very clear that the US should supply to us technology and not crops and not raw material. Yeah.
So all eyes will be on talks which are likely to happen between India and US officials over the next few days, and any kind of commentary that comes in will also be crucial for commodity sector in particular. Mr. Chandrasekhar, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here on ET Now and helping us understand what the latest commentary on rice imports into the US actually means for India's rice exporters. But other than rice, several other commodities continue to remain in focus, copper and palm oil in particular. What are the factors driving the move? Ishika, my colleague, is now joining us with all those details.
Right, so let's talk about some of the commodities in news today. We have copper and palm oil. Starting with copper, now after hitting a record high, the prices of copper have cooled down a bit. Why? Now this is because traders are waiting for the US Fed decision. A 25 basis point cut is likely, but if the Fed hints at slower cuts next year, it could hurt commodity momentum. Furthermore, even with today's dip, copper has had a big throughout, up 30%, but the rally looks stretched now. Now this is because copper looks technically overbought and China is still showing weak demand as buyers are failing to absorb higher prices, right? Now on to palm oil. Prices are moving towards a 2-week low due to softer demand. Now one of the key reasons for this is winter in northern India. Now during winter months, palm oil thickens and users switch to soybean oil. Another key reason that palm oil is also under pressure is because of cheaper crude oil, which hurts its biofuel demand. Now the market is also waiting for Malaysia's supply data, with surveys hinting at the biggest stockpile in over 6 years.